Hi everyone, my name is Vaughn Hatton, and I'm running for the Republican nomination for Congress in Utah's 2nd District. I'd like to take a moment and tell you a little bit about why I'm running, and how I can improve the representation that we have here. I'd like you to think for a moment about the last time you heard a Republican ask the question, why haven't you been able to get our ideas through Congress? Like eliminating the Department of Education or getting Utah's lands back, etc. And they'll always tell you the same thing, which is that we just don't have enough Republicans in DC to make those ideas happen. Now this is true, however, while some Republicans are fighting to change that, others are saying it as though they're reporting the weather. It's not anybody's fault, there's nothing anyone can do about it. You just have to roll with it. But this isn't true at all. There are a lot of things we can do to get more Republicans in Washington, D.C., to help win elections nationwide and really swing the mood of the nation toward a more ideas-oriented electorate. As all of you know, it's not our ideas that are the reason for us losing elections. The reason we lose elections is because those elections aren't about ideas. In 2012, the Democrats were running advertisements saying things like Romney puts the dog on top of his car, doesn't love his garbage man enough to give him a hug. They really talked about all sorts of things that had nothing to do with political ideas and policy. What it really ended up coming down to in 2012 was the rich white Mormon versus the first black president. It was all about imagery, emotion, and the historic nature of Barack Obama's presidency, instead of political ideas and the different visions for America. But we can change this. We can make elections about policies and substance, but we must have representatives and senators in Washington who are brave enough to speak to the American people directly. The American people perceive the elections to be about what they hear, and if all they're hearing is emotional and image-oriented material, then that's what they will vote on. But if we approach the American people and speak to them on a regular basis about our ideas, our success, how Republican ideas have worked so well in places like Utah, then we can start making elections about policy. And whenever elections are voted on based on ideas and policies, we win. Now there are a few Republicans in Washington, D.C., like Jason Chaffetz, who had over 60 national interviews last year alone, and people like Mike Lee, who had 45. But the majority of those in Washington, D.C. are like Chris Stewart, where he did not have a single national televised interview. Not one. Now it's understandable why this is. There's a fear of public speaking in all of us, and our legislators are no exception. And especially with the treatment they get in the media, the slightest misstep can put their careers in jeopardy. It's not the same for the Democrats. You may remember Joe Biden said the F word live on television. No one cared. Jesse Jackson said he wanted to castrate President Obama on air. Nobody cared. But Mitt Romney says just the slightest thing wrong, which was binders full of women instead of binders full of women's resumes. This is a scandal. This is a horrible thing that really shows Mitt Romney's bigotries and proves why he should not be president. I mean, you can really see the double standard in the media, and so I can understand the fear that Republicans have of public speaking. But we can't let that fear paralyze us into inaction and silence. Now I'd like to give 3 ways how I can better communicate our ideas to the nation than Representative Stewart has thus far. And while I'll be using Representative Stewart here for these examples, keep in mind that I'm not trying to convince you that he's a bad person or even a bad representative, but to illustrate how I can do even better in his place. The first thing we need to keep in mind when sharing our ideas is to think about where we are doing so. There's a link right below this video that will take you to Representative Stewart's YouTube channel, where you'll be able to confirm that the only places he's appeared to talk about Utah's 2nd District's principles and values has been on C-SPAN or local networks in Utah. It's generally a waste of time to appear on C-SPAN because only a few thousand people are watching it at any given time. And they're also not considered to be a serious competitor for viewership around America by any stretch. Local networks, on the other hand, actually have more viewers than C-SPAN does. However, the ultimate goal of communicating our ideas and principles should ultimately be to get more Republicans in Washington, D.C. so that we can then get our ideas passed. And the voters of Utah are not the reason that there are so many Democrats in Washington, and certainly not the reason that Democrats have control of the Senate. So we have to take our message beyond the borders of Utah. And that's why I stress that national networks are the best place to share our ideas, because that's, of course, talking to voters nationwide. So if honored to represent the people of Utah's 2nd District, I promise that I'll be on national networks like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, etc., where they have large audiences of people who don't think the same as we do here in Utah, and who really do need to be hearing our message. The second way that I can better spread our message is through the principle of timing. Timing is critical in politics, and I have a perfect example here of what I mean. This is a video from Representative Stewart's YouTube channel, where he's talking about President Obama acting unconstitutionally when it comes to the issuance of executive orders and bypassing the legislative branch. Now this is a great thing to be saying, but look at the date. January 9th, 2014. And if you return to his YouTube channel, you'll see that he hasn't talked about this before either. But this is the kind of thing the American people needed to hear when President Obama was granting waivers, exemptions, and delays in certain provisions of Obamacare, rewriting the law, which is not something that he has the authority to do. But what's the use of talking about this months after the fact? Months after the fight is over, months after the American people have stopped thinking about it. That's not acceptable. So I promise to tell the American people what we believe when those ideas are relevant and when the battles are being fought politically. The third thing that we have to keep in mind is how often we're sharing our message. Because even if you appear the right place at the right time, let's say on Fox News on a Monday evening, the people watching on Wednesday afternoon may be a completely different audience. And so we must continue to appear regularly so our message reaches the greatest number of people possible. Now that I've told you a little bit about what I want to improve in our representation, I'd love to give you a few examples. I hope that you'll look at my videos that I've made about the economy, healthcare, immigration, and energy so that you'll have an idea as to how I will represent your ideas on the national stage if given the opportunity. Thank you.